called it a celebration. His mother had booked the private room at Canoe, 43rd floor, Toronto skyline at dusk, and I stood at the window thinking about how I'd paid the deposit on that room 14 months ago when she'd asked me to handle the details for my father-in-law's retirement dinner. She'd forgotten that, of course. Or maybe she hadn't forgotten. Maybe she just didn't think it mattered anymore. His name is Gordon. My husband. We'd been married for 7 years, together for 9, and somewhere in the last 2 of those 9 years, I'd started noticing the way he looked at me across a dinner table. The way you look at furniture you're tired of but haven't gotten around to replacing yet. I noticed other things too. The way he'd stop asking about my work. The way his phone screen went dark whenever I walked into the room. Small things. The kind you catalog quietly while everyone around you keeps telling you that you are imagining it. I wasn't imagining it. Her name was Simone. She worked in his firm's Vancouver office. I found out not because he told me, not because I went looking, but because his mother mentioned her, casually, over the phone, in a conversation she thought I wasn't on. She'd picked up the landline in the kitchen. I'd already picked up in the study. I heard 30 seconds before I set the receiver down without a word. She's exactly what Gordon needs right now. Someone who understands the business. That was 4 months before the retirement dinner. I want to explain something about those 4 months. Because people always ask. Friends, later, when everything had already unravelled, they ask how I stayed, how I kept cooking Sunday dinners and attending firm events and smiling at his parents across the table. And the honest answer is that I wasn't staying. I was preparing. I'm a tax attorney. I've been practicing for 16 years. I've spent my career watching people make financial decisions in emotional moments and lose everything because they move too fast. I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going to be the woman who confronts her husband at a restaurant and walks away with nothing but righteous anger and a story to tell. So I called my own lawyer, a woman I'd referred clients to for years and trusted completely. And over 4 months, quietly, methodically, I started understanding exactly what I had and exactly what was mine. There's a lot. Gordon and I had built something together. Or rather, I had built something and Gordon had stood next to me while it happened. The law firm bearing my mother's maiden name, Aldridge Family Law, which I'd incorporated 12 years ago with an inheritance she'd left me and my own student loans and 7 years of 90-hour weeks. Gordon had joined as a partner 6 years in after his previous firm dissolved. I brought him in. His name was on the door now, but the equity structure, every line of it, drawn up before he joined, remained 68% mine. The condo we lived in, the one in the distillery district that his mother liked to tour visitors through and refer to as Gordon and his wife's place, purchased with my bonus in 2018, title in my name alone because Gordon had had a tax lien that year and we'd agreed it was cleaner this way. He'd forgotten about that arrangement, or chosen to. And the prenuptial agreement we'd signed before the wedding. The one his parents had pushed for, ironically because they'd wanted to protect the Mercer family assets, had been drafted by my mentor, reviewed by me, line by line, and contained provisions that his family's lawyer clearly hadn't read carefully enough. It protected what I'd brought in, every dollar of it. I didn't tell Gordon any of this during those 4 months. I went to work. I came home. I attended the retirement dinner planning meetings with his mother, who spoke to me the way you speak to a personal assistant you find slightly irritating. I nodded. I made notes. I confirmed the reservation at Canoe. The dinner was a Friday in October. Maple leaves on the sidewalks outside. That particular Toronto evening light that turns everything amber and makes the city look warmer than it is. I arrived with Gordon. We sat down, his parents, his brother Owen and Owen's wife, 2 of his father's old colleagues, and Simone. She was already there when we walked in. Sitting 2 seats from Gordon's designated chair, his mother had arranged the place cards. Gordon stiffened slightly when he saw her, just for a second. Then he smiled and said her name, and I watched him decide in real time that this was fine, that I wouldn't understand the significance, that I would assume she was just a colleague. I watched all of that happen on his face, and I picked up my glass of sparkling water, and I smiled at his father and said his retirement was well-deserved and meant it, because his father, whatever else was true, had worked hard and had never been unkind to me. His mother gave a toast. She talked about the Mercer family legacy, She talked about Gordon taking the firm into its next chapter. She talked, warmly and at length, about Simone's contributions to the Vancouver office and how wonderful it was to finally have her at the family table. Family table. I watched Owen's wife across the room. Her eyes met mine for just a moment and I saw it. The flicker of something. She knew. She'd known longer than I had. Probably. And she'd said nothing, and I made a note of that too and forgave her for it immediately because she was in her own impossible position and that was not my business tonight. Gordon did not look at me during the toast. He looked at the table. Then at Simone. Then at his wine glass. After dinner, while his parents were saying goodbye to the colleagues, Gordon touched my elbow and said he needed to talk to me. Quietly. Maybe we should step outside. I said, sure. We stood on the terrace. The lake was dark below us. He said things I had been expecting him to say for 4 months, that things hadn't been right between us for a while, that he hadn't meant for it to happen this way, that Simone was, and here he paused, choosing the word, important to him now, that he thought it would be better for both of us if we started thinking about next steps. He was sorry. I listened to the whole thing. I looked at the lake while he talked. When he finished, I turned to him and said, okay. He blinked. I think he'd expected tears. Or anger. He said, okay. I said, yes. We should talk to lawyers. I'll have mine contact you. He said he thought we could handle it between ourselves. Keep it civil. He said, and I want to remember exactly how he said this, that he didn't think it needed to be complicated. Given that the firm was a partnership and everything was sort of shared anyway. I looked at him for a moment. I said, Gordon, what percentage of Aldridge family law do you think you own? He said he wasn't sure of the exact number, but it was roughly equal, wasn't it? Given how long they'd been... I said, 32%. You own 32%. It's in the shareholder agreement you signed in 2019. My lawyer drafted it. You had independent counsel. He stared at me. I said, and the condo is in my name, title and deed, solely. We put it that way because of your lien. I have all the paperwork. He said that didn't seem right. I said, and the prenuptial agreement protects everything I brought into the marriage. Your family's lawyer negotiated it. You signed it 8 years ago at a table in your parents' dining room. Do you remember? Your father shook my hand after. Gordon's face had gone through several things while I was speaking. Confusion first, then something harder. He said, you've been planning this. I said, I've been understanding my own situation. There's a difference. He said he wanted to talk to a lawyer. I said, that's a good idea. I already have. I went back inside and spent 40 minutes talking to his father about his plans to take up sailing in retirement, which he was genuinely excited about and I was genuinely glad for him. And when I finally said goodnight to everyone, I hugged his mother and she hugged me back and I thought, she has no idea what just happened on that terrace. She thought tonight was the beginning of something. She arranged those place cards. She gave that toast. She had no idea it was the last time she'd be managing anything that involved me. The next weeks were not pleasant. I won't pretend they were. Gordon had a conversation with his family, and his family had reactions, and some of those reactions reached me through channels I hadn't anticipated. His mother called me 3 times. The third call, she stopped being polite. She told me I was being vindictive. She said Gordon was entitled to the firm he'd built with me. She said I was destroying the family. I said, I hope he'll be happy. She hung up. My own lawyer, whose name I will not share because she deserves her privacy, was very good. She was calm and precise, and she had handled enough of these cases to find nothing surprising. She said the equity structure was airtight. She said the property title was clear. She said the prenuptial agreement would hold. She said Gordon's counsel would push back, but she didn't think they'd find much to push back with. She was right. What I hadn't known during those 4 months? What emerged later, during the process, was that Gordon had been using the firm's trust account as if it were a personal line of credit. Not dramatically, not in a way that would have been obvious, but in a way that was, when examined carefully, illegal. He'd moved client retainer funds to cover a personal investment that had gone sideways, replaced them before any client was affected. That the movement itself, the timing, the paper trail, was the kind of thing the Law Society of Ontario takes seriously. I had not been looking for this. My lawyer found it during discovery and brought it to me and asked how I wanted to proceed. I thought about it for 3 days. Gordon had been my husband for 7 years. Whatever he had done, and whatever had come apart between us, I had loved him. I did not love him lightly or briefly. I grieved the loss of it even while I was doing everything necessary to protect myself from it. But there were clients in those files. People who had come to our firm in the worst moments of their lives, custody disputes, estate conflicts, financial unraveling, and who had trusted us with their money and their cases. I had obligations that were older than my marriage. I had my mother's name on the door. I reported it to the Law Society. I gave them everything. Gordon's license was suspended pending investigation. The process moved, as these things do, slowly and then all at once. He retained a defense lawyer. He made statements I won't repeat. He was ultimately asked to surrender his partnership share in exchange for a structured resolution that avoided criminal charges, which his lawyer negotiated and which I neither encouraged nor opposed. He now works in compliance for an insurance company in Mississauga. I know this because Owen told me 2 years later, over coffee. Owen, who had eventually called me and apologized in a way that was genuine enough that I accepted it. He said Gordon was doing okay. He said Simone had moved back to Vancouver. He said his mother had eventually stopped blaming me for everything, mostly. I said I was glad he was okay. I meant it. Aldridge family law is still practicing. We hired a new partner last spring, a man 8 years my junior who trained at a firm I've admired for a long time and who asked, during his interview, about the name on the door. I told him about my mother. He nodded like he understood. I think he did. The condo I sold. I bought a house in Leslieville, East End, smaller, a garden in the back that I'm still figuring out. My neighbor grows tomatoes and brings them over in paper bags and doesn't ask questions, and I find that very restful. My father-in-law sent me a card after the Law Society proceedings concluded. Just a few lines. He said he was sorry for how things had happened. He said he'd always respected me. He said he hoped I would be well. I kept the card. It's in the second drawer of my desk at work under some files. I don't look at it often. I don't need to. The firm is mine. It always was. It just took a retirement dinner on the 43rd floor for everyone else to understand that. I think about the place cards a lot. Someone had to write those names out, fold the cardstock, walk around that table and decide where everyone would sit. That took intention. That took planning. And the strange thing is, that planning is what saved me. Not in the way she intended. But cause and effect rarely cares about intention. What I've come to understand, sitting with this for 2 years now, is that every outcome in that story traced back to choices made long before the dinner at Cano. Gordon chose to move client funds and then chose not to tell me. His mother chose to manage the situation as though I were a piece to be moved off the board. And I had made my own choices years earlier, to understand every document I signed, to protect what I'd built, to think clearly in moments when feeling was the easier option. None of those choices were dramatic. That's what I want people to understand. There was no single moment of courage. There was just a long, quiet accumulation of doing the right thing when no one was watching, and doing the harder thing when the easier thing was available. My mother used to say that integrity is what you do with the paperwork when no one's checking. She was a paralegal for 30 years, and she meant it literally. I understood it that way too, for most of my career. Now I think she meant it in a broader sense. You build a life the same way you build a file, carefully, completely, with the understanding that someone may examine it closely one day and you want it to hold up. I reported Gordon to the Law Society because there were clients in those files, real people who had trusted us. I want to be honest, it was not an easy decision. I sat with it for 3 days. I thought about our wedding. I thought about who he'd been when I first met him and whether that person still existed somewhere. I don't know the answer to that. But I know what my obligations were, and I know I would not have been able to carry the name Aldridge on that door if I had looked the other way. That's the part no one talks about in these stories. The cost of doing the right thing. It isn't free. It doesn't feel triumphant in the moment. It feels like loss, layered over more loss, and you do it anyway because your sense of who you are is not negotiable. What carried me through, and I've turned this over many times, was a combination of things I didn't have names for while they were happening. A refusal to be dishonest, even when honesty was expensive. A willingness to think slowly and carefully when every instinct said to react. And a kind of stubbornness, not pride exactly, more like a deep unwillingness to become a version of myself I wouldn't recognize. Gordon made choices that compounded against him. I made choices that compounded for me. The dinner was just the moment the accounting became visible. The tomatoes my neighbor brought over last August were very good. I ate them standing at the kitchen counter with olive oil and salt, and I thought, this is enough. This is, actually, more than enough. The firm is still there. My mother's name is still on the door. That's what I built. That's what held.